The Trump administration promised that there would be a price to pay for what it considers anti-Semitic protests on college campuses. Now Columbia University is in the administration's crosshairs. The New York City Ivy League was ground zero for last spring's demonstrations and student encampments about what was happening in Gaza. President Donald Trump has promised to deport international students who participated in, quote, pro-jihadist protests on college campuses.
On Saturday night, U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents stopped Mahmoud Khalil. He is a Palestinian graduate student who acted as a leader in negotiations between protesters and Columbia officials last spring. He was informed that his student visa had been revoked, according to the Washington Post, who received a statement from his lawyer. The catch? Khalil is in fact a green card holder, which means, of course, that he is a lawful permanent resident.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio posted on X, "We will be revoking the visas and/or green cards of Hamas supporters in America so that they can be deported." The Anti-Defamation League's Jonathan Greenblatt was swift to applaud the move. He posted a long tweet on X that said, in part, "Over the past 18 months, these institutions have not effectively addressed the rot of anti-Semitism. That's why they scored so poorly on ADL's recent campus anti-Semitism report card. It's abominable to see how a minority of malevolent students, radicalized faculty, and outside agitators have hijacked the school, diverting it away from its core purpose, preventing everyone else from studying, learning, and working."
Reactions in support of the protesters were swift. Journalist Peter Beinart wrote on X, "Anyone with eyes can see that the Trump administration is using claims of anti-Semitism to cripple universities, along with independent media, because they are centres of resistance to its effort at authoritarian rule. And the ADL is applauding. It's applauding an assault on liberal democracy itself. What a shameful moment in American Jewish history." The level of clampdown against Americans is unlike any other since 9/11. That too was a period when Arabs living in the US could be routinely swept up and placed in jail without due process.
The move comes on the heels of the administration pulling $400 million that had been earmarked for the university. According to the administration officials, at least 9 other universities, including USC and UCLA, are also being investigated for anti-Semitic behavior. So I am not in support of this as a general principle. I am an ardent defender of free speech and the First Amendment. Now, of course, it is probably would to be argued and beyond the scope of my legal expertise for whether the First Amendment applies to, I think it certainly applies to green card holders, but to people on student visas, I don't know. I'm not making a claim either way. It might be constitutional for the government to revoke their status. I would think that would not be the case for green card holders, but perhaps for student visas based on whatever reason, frankly. That may not violate the First Amendment. You could make an argument, certainly, that it does. I could understand the argument. I've said this before. The First Amendment is a restraint on the government's behavior. It's not actually just affirmative right. I mean, if you think about what it says the federal government may not infringe on free speech.
Sure.
Now, for instance, in the example of the TikTok case, they said, well, that's a Chinese foreign company, so the First Amendment does not apply. That's what the Supreme Court said. I could see a similar argument here for students who are not, although you could still make the case, while they're here, they benefit, if they're actually in the country, they benefit from the protections of the First Amendment. Either way, I don't think it's a good look. I don't think it's a good idea to be cracking down on dissent. I have no sympathy for, no common cause for the minority of the protesters who are, in my view, displaying outright solidarity with or sympathy for Hamas. We can argue about how much of the movement that is. I've repeatedly referenced one of the pro-Palestinian student groups that put out a statement in support of what Hamas did on the day of the terrorist attack. I think that is loathsome and deserves criticism, but I am very, very reluctant, inclined not to ever endorse an effort by the federal government to violate people's free speech rights, even if I find the speech reprehensible, because the government is not a good determinator of what speech is beyond the pale, and this same power will be used against my speech or your speech or hate speech or misinformation. It's the slippery slope. We see it in practice all the time. I would not do this.
There are several messy elements to this case in particular, and then I'll talk more about the bigger picture of it. But in this case, to your point about student visas versus green cards, the agents who came to detain this guy, Mahmoud Khalil, appear to have believed wrongly that he was still on a student visa, when in fact he is, according to his lawyer, a green card holder. And as you correctly point out, having a green card does not give you absolutely every right of a citizen, but does give you much more protection than if you're simply on a student visa. There is then a separate question that no one appears to know where this guy is now. He was initially processed in downtown Manhattan. Now there's some suggestion he could be held as far away as Louisiana, and his lawyer has not been told where he is. I think that obviously is really serious cause for concern. The bigger picture here is that in a way, I think when obviously it is important, his case is important on a human level. I don't know exactly what the allegations are against him. He says they're to do with social media posts that he didn't write. I think that there are genuine questions about people on student visas who articulate views that are blatantly pro any kind of terrorist organization or pro-violence. That is different from the widespread expression of sympathy for the Palestinian cause. So I have a lot of problems with the idea of a creeping authoritarianism or abridgment of those views.
Yeah, I really want to know more about what they're saying that he did right. Again, even frankly, from my point of view, even if I would be most sympathetic to some kind of, you could revoke his visa if he was engaged in a kind of, if he was one of the people occupying the building. They said he was doing negotiation on behalf of that group. Like, well, if he now occupying the building is not the most serious of what, like, trespassing violations.
Yeah.
You know, if there are students here on visas engaged in rioting or violence or something, well, yeah, that's not free speech. You could make the argument for revoking their visas. Right. I don't know exactly what he was doing.
Well, and Dropsite News, which is a fairly new news organization, did get a statement from a DHS spokesperson. And this is what I mean about the creeping sort of authoritarianism. The spokesperson said, Khalid led activities aligned to Hamas. What does that even mean? I mean, if you're calling for an end to Israel's assault on Gaza, are you doing that? Or does it need to be more than that? Are you saying victory to Hamas? I mean,
am I engaged in activities aligned with Russia because I agree that Ukraine should seek peace immediately? Right. It starts to become that level of just agreeing with some adversary or just recognizing the reality of the situation is and I'm very cautious about people should have the right to criticize Israel. It is not the same thing as just criticizing Jewish people. I think a lot of the people engaged in these protests are not going about it in the smartest way, and I have seen displays of outright support for Hamas that I think is abominable, but again, it's free. It's a free country.
And to the point about it being a free country, just on the bigger picture, the thing that I think is, with all due respect to Mr. Khalil, the broader, more worrying thing is this revocation of a massive amount of funding for Columbia that seems designed to have Columbia punish its students for expressing views that the administration doesn't agree with in some way. And you see that as being part of this bigger picture where the Trump administration has attacked the judiciary in terms of calling for the impeachment of judges, attacked law enforcement in terms of booting out people who it considers associated with the January the 6th cases and inserting loyalists in their place, attacked the media by suing CBS, and there is just this kicking away of the pillars of dissent or pluralism in a democratic society.
Here's where we might disagree. I don't necessarily disagree with what you're just saying, and I think a lot of the Trump administrations you just listed are not, I don't agree with them. I don't agree with suing CBS or any of those cases. I would not specifically yank the funding from Columbia because it's the kind of activism its students are engaged in.
Right.
I would, however, be in favor of giving less government funding to elite powerful, wealthy, private educational institutions. Do they need government money? Do they need subsidy, the taxpayers to subsidize Columbia University, among the most prestigious and elite institutions in the world?
That's a separate institution.
Well, I don't know.
It's a separate argument because you basically, as a libertarian, believe in government spending and almost nothing.
Well, I would rather do government spending on just about anything else than Columbia University. What, does a swimming pool need a, do we need a new tennis court? Do we need a flat screen TV in every dorm room? My goodness.
But you wouldn't, as a free speech activist,
they should not be
propose the money being taken away because of views that their students
I would just
exhibit.
take it away not for that reason, just because they don't have a right to our money and are not.
But I know we're having a lot, but it has to concern. I mean, yes.
No, it does concern me. I mean, what can I say? It does concern me. Yes,
okay.
They should not be punished for that reason.
Right.
I would say that, universities being investigated for the wrong think or behaviors of the students is nothing new and is not just something the Trump administration suddenly did. I complained for years and did a lot of reporting on similar threats to revoke federal funding for educational institutions based on them, the Obama and Biden administration's conviction that they were not taking Title IX seriously enough, that they were allowing too much sexual harassment and misconduct on campus, that I thought those actions were threatening free speech because they started prescribing, well, if there's an accusation, then these are the procedures you need to go through, and the procedures are just, even from a progressive standpoint, are so unfriendly to due process and basic fairness, and that was being forced on them by the federal government with the threat of federal funding being revoked. If we just didn't give the federal funding, that threat would not exist anymore.
Well, we need to keep institutions at their finest, most well-researched, resourced element.
Okay. Up next, did two millennial lawmakers from opposite sides of the aisle find a secret sauce to be able to work together? That's AOC and Anna Paulina Luna. We'll discuss. Stay tuned.